It was supposed to be the perfect exchange. Guns for oil, shells for survival. Two isolated regimes, saving each other from collapse. But now, the deal lies in ruins, and the world is watching two dictators choke on their own desperation. The $1.5 billion arms deal between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin was meant to change the war in Ukraine. Instead, it's changing the balance of power inside North Korea and Russia themselves. Because when the first crates arrived, soldiers cheered. When they opened them, they stopped. Rotten ammunition, defective rockets, explosives that fizzled instead of detonating. Within weeks, the whisper started. Russia's new supply line is a death trap. The alliance built on secrecy had just exposed its own weakness. A partnership forged by fear, broken by failure. Rewind to early 2024. Russia's stockpiles were bleeding. Artillery shortages crippled the front. Factories in Tula and Perm worked 20 hours a day, but the numbers didn't add up. Then, in stepped Kim. The North Korean leader saw opportunity where others saw isolation. Food, fuel, and foreign currency. Russia could give him all three. In return, he'd provide what Moscow needed most: ammunition, missiles, and denial. The handshake took place in shadows, on a railway platform in the Russian Far East. No press, no statements. Just two men trading weakness disguised as strategy. For Putin, it meant buying time. For Kim, it meant buying relevance. Both thought they'd outsmarted the world. Neither realized they just tied themselves to each other's downfall. At first, the shipments moved quietly. Thousands of containers marked industrial goods crossed the border at night. Satellites caught them anyway. Western analysts tracked the trains from Rajin to Vladivostok, then westward through Siberia. Inside, nearly 2 million artillery shells and hundreds of ballistic rockets. But by the time they reached Russian firing lines, the truth exploded, literally. Shells misfired. Warheads cracked. Some didn't detonate at all. One Ukrainian report called them suicidal munitions. Even Russian soldiers began joking. Kim's gifts kill more of us than them. The defect rate? Over 40%. And when you're fighting a modern war, that's not logistics failure. That's collapse. Russian officers complained quietly. But in Moscow, silence was survival. No one dared tell Putin his new friend had just sent him junk. Then came the leaks. Ukrainian intelligence intercepted the route maps. American satellites followed the containers. And within weeks, every major transfer point, from North Korean ports to Russian depots, was identified. Ukraine turned exposure into offense. Precision strikes targeted warehouses near Belgrade and Luhansk. Dozens of rail cars went up in flames. Footage spread across social media before Moscow could even issue denials. The secret lifeline that was meant to sustain Russia became its most vulnerable artery. Every explosion carried two messages. To the world, we're watching. To Russia, we know exactly where your desperation ends. What was once a hidden alliance became a public humiliation, a partnership too proud to admit weakness. Now bleeding credibility in real time. The diplomatic backlash was instant. The UN passed new resolutions targeting the entire trade chain. Shipping insurers pulled out. Even China quietly froze certain transactions to avoid secondary sanctions. In Pyongyang, Kim's mood turned violent. Officials from his munitions bureau vanished overnight. Engineers were paraded through televised re-education sessions. And state TV stopped mentioning Russia altogether. In Moscow, Putin's silence was louder. Kremlin insiders blamed foreign sabotage. But generals whispered the truth. The North sent us trash. The Brotherhood of Isolation had fractured, each leader blaming the other for a deal that had gone nuclear in every way except literal. And as both regimes tried to bury the story, their enemies dug deeper. Chapter 6, The Global Backfire. The disaster triggered shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. South Korea announced new radar and satellite sharing with Japan and the U.S. A regional surveillance web now watches every vessel leaving North Korean ports. Tokyo, once cautious, called the trade an existential threat. And for the first time in years, Seoul's defense ministry confirmed live-fire drills aimed directly north. Even Beijing began to shift tone. issuing quiet warnings to Pyongyang about maintaining regional stability. Translation: don't drag us into your mess. In Europe, the symbolism wasn't lost either. A supposed anti-Western axis, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, was falling apart in full view. The myth of a rising authoritarian alliance collapsed under its own incompetence. And as the world watched the wreckage burn, a new pattern emerged, not one of strength, but of synchronized decline. By summer, the front lines told a story better than any headline. Russian shelling dropped to its lowest rate since 2022. Ukraine regained lost ground near Kharkiv. And Western officials confirmed the obvious. The North Korean supply line had failed. A $1.5 billion deal that promised salvation had delivered sabotage. Because desperation doesn't buy strength. It buys shortcuts. And shortcuts collapse. Kim's factories couldn't sustain the output. Quality checks were ignored. Corruption rotted the process from within. Meanwhile, Russia's faith in its allies vanished. Its war machine, once fueled by pride, now ran on excuses. Two dictators tried to cheat history, and history refused. Winter, a rail yard deep in Siberia. Snow falls over a line of rusting cargo containers. Faded stencils read, DPRK, export number 47. No one guards them now. No one claims them. Inside, broken shells and damp gunpowder. The physical remains of a political fantasy. The last train of that billion-dollar deal sits frozen in time. A monument to greed, failure, and the myth of invincibility. For Kim, it's a warning. For Putin, a mirror. And for the world, a reminder, alliances built on lies always detonate from within. Because in the end, power doesn't crumble from attack. It collapses from incompetence. The deal that wasn't supposed to fail did exactly what desperation always does. It destroyed its makers. Because history doesn't always explode, sometimes it implodes. This is History Nexus, where silence breaks empires